Dispersion of power, if you will, and title and hierarchy and the gender implications and then all the other dynamics that are at play. And there's no question that racism is still here. We live in one of the most segregated communities in the country, and having that learning in my hometown breaks my heart. I witness racism on a daily basis. It can happen in subtle ways and not so subtle ways. It can be who's in the room and who's not in the room, who's at the table, who's missing from the table where conversations are taking place. It can be that people look at me and make eye contact with me and not my colleague of color. It can be in a range of ways of who has access and who does not. I'm reminded of, the story which is often told around two fish in a fishbowl, and one fish asks the other, "How's the water?" And the other fish says, "What water?" And I think that is such an illustration of if you grow up, particularly as a white person with privilege, you don't know the privilege that you have. We're not taught in school. It just becomes part of your reality, and it's hard to see the water, to know that it's around you in so many different ways and shows itself. But once you see the water, once we, particularly as white people, take the time to become educated, to listen, to learn, and listen some more, in that way we can learn how to be better allies, and we can learn and earn that opportunity to support our colleagues, our friends, our family of color. There's no question that as a white person, I've experienced fewer barriers than those of color. And as a woman, I've encountered barriers, no question, but also not the same size or significance of barriers as women of color. And that is what we need to reconcile with, that racism is a system that is in place based on advantages and disadvantages. And once I recognize that and learn that, and particularly advantages that I didn't necessarily earn, that makes a time an opportunity to reflect, to learn, and really to become part of the conversation for change. I have focused a majority of my career and my personal life around community change efforts, and underlying that is the basic rights of human beings for all. And I thought of that as an equality, an issue of equality and an effort around equality. And as I've evolved in my learning and what I've experienced throughout my life, I realize now that equality isn't enough. Equality is about having equal opportunity. Equity is making sure that everyone has what they need to achieve success. And we don't start at the same starting line. You can look at the history in our own communities, the history in our families, the history in our nation, and we know that things are simply not at the same starting point. So we have to recognize that equity is the goal, and it takes different strategies and different ways for us to engage to be able to accomplish it. So Rochester is my hometown, and when I had friends visit from other communities and reflected to me about how deeply segregated our community was, because you grow up here, you live here, and to learn about the deep history in Rochester, to learn how it manifests itself, is very troubling and disturbing. And what I have hope about is that we are talking about structural racism in ways and at tables that I've never seen before. That we have leaders and leadership like at the City of Rochester that is taking a step forward, a very significant step forward, and a commitment as an institution, as a workforce to take this head on. That we are at the United Way investing and supporting REGI, so the Racial Equity Justice Initiative, and committing our staff to go there. And there's 70 staff from the city represented at the summit just recently. It is this effort that we are all having a movement, a swelling, if you will, of support and energy to talk about structural racism that is so essential. At the United Way, we are 100 years old, and we have been serving this community to address poverty and to ensure basic human needs are met and to invest in critical programs. We also know, humbly so, that programs are not the way that we are going to address and solve these entrenched social problems and challenges. There's something else going on, deeply going on, for us to address, to be able to move the needle as a community. So while we continue at United Way to invest and to ensure that we're addressing pain and we're addressing challenges of today, if we want to get to the better tomorrow, we have to address these uncomfortable conversations, our history, and really work towards more viable solutions as a community.